Hello, I'm Pamela Davis. Welcome to episode 216 of the Well Done Life podcast. Hello, and welcome back to episode 216 of the Well Done Life podcast. I'm your host, Pamela Davis. If you are new here, hey, how are you? Welcome. I hope that you will stay for a very long time. If you've been here before, you guys know the deal. I love you deep. Thank you so much for continuing to rock with me every week. I hope that you will continue to stay on the journey and bring friends. Before we get started with this week's episode, it's always really important for me to be foundational. If you've been with me for a while, I'm sure you can probably recite this with me, but I really feel like it's important that we make sure that we lay our foundation for this safe space on a very important foundation. And with that, my foundation is made up of two very important things, which are clarity and love. Clarity is straightforward. I just like to make sure you understand that the Well Done Life brand is a brand that I created for women because I believe in the power of us. I believe that we need more spaces where we can be our most authentic self. I mean, yes, in this space, I share my story, the good and the bad, and so that you can learn from me, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that I made, so that hopefully maybe I inspire you to realize that, you know what, I can make it too. I can overcome anything I put my mind to, as well as it's also important for me to highlight stories of other women in the community who are doing amazing things because, again, I just want you all to see that a lot of times what we think are differences, they really aren't. They're really similarities. It's just packaged in different ways. And we need spaces to realize that everybody has gone through seasons of good and bad. And the only thing that has gotten us through is resiliency and just this unequivocal desire and faith in God to realize that we are more powerful than anything that we will go through. And that if we give each other the space to talk, really talk, to shed the tears, to laugh, to cry, to just really get down to the brass tacks of matters, that we can all win. There is space for us all. So that's what this space is about. And so welcome. I hope, like I said, you will stay for a very long time and bring lots of friends because there's always room at my table for you. So before we get into this week's topic, I really want to make sure that I'm foundational also with love. Love is my second foundation. It is my favorite foundation. It is the thing that I love talking about because I love love. I'm a sucker for love. And it is very important for me every week that I share prayers with you because I truly believe that the power of two or more coming together in prayer is just magnification, and we all need to be praying for each other. And so I always like to make sure that I share my prayers with you so that you know where my heart set is, my intention. And so this week, I am praying for you to have prayers of peace. We're going to talk a little bit more about peace in maybe a more radical way as we get into today's topic. But peace is important. I'm standing on peace. So I think I'm going to be standing on peace for a long time. And I hope that by me standing on it, that you will feel inspired to stand on it as well. It is so important to maintain your peace because right now in these times, it is very easy to be triggered. It is very easy to feel like, you know what, they are really trying to try me because people are really trying to try you. And you have to recognize the power of standing in your peace, the power of remembering who you are. We're going to talk a lot more about it. You're not just who you are as a person, but who you are in God, who you are destined to be, who you were called to be. You have to remember who you are, because those moments of remembering who you are, those moments of peace where you sit down and you get back to center will help you navigate the craziness, will help you see through the baiting, will help you see through the trickery, because that's really what a lot of this is, so that you will act outside of who you were called to be. Don't lose your character because the world is trying to make you believe who they think you are. Remember who you are. And I've talked about that before, and I guess that even leads into my second prayer. It is really important at this time, if you don't stand on anything, that you stand on a prayer of standing on business. And when I talk about standing on business, I'm not just talking about it from a financial standpoint. To me, that's really more about abundance. And of course, I'm always going to wish that you have abundance. I want you to be abundant on all levels. But I'm talking about standing on business as it relates to you. You have to remember you are the one who defines who you are. You and God. God told you who you were before you were even a speck in your mother's eye. He knew who you were. And so you have to remember who you are. You have to remember who you are in God. For you are chosen. You are his child. He loves you. And you have to stand on business about that. And when you stand on business about that, it means that you have made a decision not to allow people to play about you, because people will play in your face. People will. It's just a natural desire, because people, unfortunately, sometimes, especially in situations where they have been hurt, especially in situations where they are not well within their spirit, they try to tear down other people, where they try to have malicious intentions, where they try to, defame your name. And I don't believe in haters, because I don't really think that that's where it's rooted of. Like I said, I think a lot of times it's rooted in hurt, because hurt people tend to hurt other people. But I think that it's important that you stand on business about who you are, because you have to remember that when other people try to attack you. You have to remember who you are in God, because when people try to attack you, they're going to look at the surface things. They're going to try to go to the emotions. They're going to try to hit you where it hurts. And when you know who you are, you remember that. And even though it may feel like you are hurting, you come back to center, because you remember that all seasons come to an end, and that there always will be joy in the morning if I remember who I am in God. And God will never put you in places where you are not supposed to be, because you will remember who you are. So don't ever let anyone define you for who they think you are. Define yourself. And we're going to talk a lot about it. But yes, you have to stand on business about you. You have to. And then I guess leading into my other prayer, because typically I like to round it out with abundance. But I feel like, again, this week, just the way things have kind of gone, I feel like it's also important to root yourself in clarity. So that's going to be my final prayer. I am praying for you to have clarity, because in order for you to stand on business about yourself, you have to be clear about who you are. You have to be clear about whose you are. Yes, in these days and times, you're at that season where it is time for you to decide who you belong to. And it's not a matter of it being a forced decision. It never is. To know who God is never a force. God always gives you the power of free will, but you have to know who you belong to. You do. You have to know. Because if you remember who you belong to, navigating this crazy system will not feel as heavy as it feels when you don't. Because when you don't, and don't get me wrong, I've been in seasons where I wasn't fully involved as closely as I am with God, where I wasn't born again, where I was still in the world. And I felt the longing. I felt the pull in my spirit. And I remember my search to finding my path, to finding this situation where I felt like God dwelled completely in God, and I felt safe and ready to call out to God and ask him to, forgive me, to take me in, to surrender my life back to Christ. And I remember those pulls. I remember waking out of my sleep, trying to figure it out. I remember feeling like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. And it was because I wasn't 100% clear, but when I got clear, when I found my space, when I found my church home, when I found my pastoral mother and my pastoral father, and I was able to commit my life to Christ, I felt in that moment a weight being lifted off of me. I felt like I was still going to face situations, because, of course, being a child of God, there's always going to be situations. There's always going to be things that you are going to face. But I felt like I had the ultimate protector. I felt like I had the ultimate father. I had the ultimate guide to help me navigate those decisions. And as I have continued to grow in my faith, as I have matured, I have recognized even more and more that as I lean into him, there is peace. So it is essential that you get clear about who you belong to. Because again, like I said, it doesn't mean that the world's going to stop attacking. But when you know who you belong to, you find peace. You find peace in the midst of chaos. You find clarity in the midst of chaos. You find strength in the midst of chaos. And you have to cultivate that relationship with him. You can't let everyone spoon feeds you about it because he wants your intention. He wants your action. He wants you. And so you got to go to him fully and clearly, but you have to get clear. And so I want you to have that clarity because it's essential. Because when you get clear and as you continue to get clear, because it's not like it's just like one poof, pow, pam, boom, all of a sudden you know it all. No. It's constantly a journey of learning and getting deeper and drawing near. It gets clearer. And in that clarity is the peace that you are looking for. In that clarity, you recognize that all these things that you are facing, there's no need for you to run and hide. You can walk through it because God is right there. He's helping you navigate through. He's never forsaken you. He's the whisper in your ear that you need to listen to. He's that pull on your heart that you feel. And you just have to get clear. And so I pray that you will give yourself that moment of clarity, that you will give yourself the key to the peace, because that is it, the clarity of being able to decide who and whose you belong to. And like I said, and I always want to reiterate this, it's not a perfect journey. There's highs, there's lows, there's ups and downs, there's missteps, all of it. But he's always there. God is always an ever-present friend, a father, a comforter, a protector, a corrector, all of those things. But you have to get clear. And you have to be willing to stand on that. Stand on who you are. Stand on what you need. Stand on who you believe. And go to him boldly and mightily, asking for him to let you in, to love on you, and to just let him know how you feel. All you have to do is do that, and he will be there for you. And I pray that you have that, because again, I really feel like that is the key to the peace that you are looking for. That place where you can dwell in your most vulnerable state, and he will surround you in love so that you have the desires and the strengths that you need to navigate through. So those are my prayers for you this week. I always, like I said, clarity, peace, and abundance, of course, always. So I am recording on Saturday, March 29th. It is 11:36 a.m. And I'm really glad to be here and recording with you today. I want to thank everyone for their support of last week's episode, The Strongest Soldier. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, it's definitely a good episode in reference to talking about being the caregiver in friendships and relationships. You know, I've been on my stronger in my caregiving game lately, and it has definitely been a challenge. And so, just kind of want to talk about how sometimes we have to stop being the strongest soldier in the army, strongest soldier in the friend group, but it's okay to let people know that, you know what, nah, I ain't got it. You got it. You can do this, and give people the space to take care of themselves so that you can take care of you. And so if you're feeling like, you know what, you might need to check yourself, I definitely would recommend that episode to you. But this week, I definitely wanted to talk with you because, it has definitely started to take a toll in regards to my mind, in regards to my spirit, about some of the things that we are experiencing in this climate that we are living in. And I know that I don't necessarily have to go into detail. I think we're all kind of newsed out, gossiped out, social media out about everything that we are experiencing. And it is something, though, that we need to talk about because we are in a moment, if you think about it, where we are being challenged, it's a possibility, I'm not even say about challenged, it actually is starting to feel like a desire to erase our history, to change it, to cultivate it to be what everyone else wants it to be. And those are really triggering points. And so I kind of wanted to pose a question to everybody because it's been, in my spirit, why do we let outside opinions define us? And how can we stop, especially when history is being rewritten in real time? And I wanted to talk about it because, again, this political climate that we are in, this climate all around is trying to erase history, especially, and I think even try to redefine what Black history looks like, ethnic history looks like within our country, which is crazy. But here's the truth. And I think that it just needs to be said, we have to remember that who we are and what we do to preserve our legacy, our peace is on us. Yeah, it's on us. We are the ones who have the power, and we have to make a decision. Are we going to allow someone to dictate who we were or who we are? Or are we always going to remember who we are, because only God can define who we are? And before we dive into this episode and really kind of break it down, I want to stand on a Bible verse. I think it's important, especially in times like this, to get very clear, like I said, about who you are. And so you have to make sure your foundation is strong. And so I want to stand on Isaiah 43:1. And essentially what Isaiah 43:1 says is, I have called you by name. You are mine. And so the thing that I want us to remind ourselves of as we start to dive into this topic a little bit further is that the reminder is no system, no law, no political agenda can erase what's already been written in us. And I want to make sure that I cap this off with 100% clarity about, how I feel and what I'm doing and where we are with things, is that I want us all to remember that we are not going to be baited. We are not going to be baited because we remember exactly who we are and who we belong to. Yep, it really is that simple. We will not be baited, because this is all this is. Let's just be clear before we really dive into it. This is baiting. This is a desire to make us forget who we are and allow ourselves to be triggered to the point that we forget who we are. And that cannot happen because we are standing on the fact that who we are is already written in us. And because before we were a speck in our mother's eye, God called us by a name and we belong to him. And so I wanted to talk about this, especially as I know recently there was an announcement by the president that there was going to be an executive order coming that would look at, taking funding away from museums, in particular the Smithsonian. And I'm sure the National African American Museum is also a part of the Smithsonian. And so that museum, having some of the exhibits funding stripped, is in jeopardy. I also want to make sure that I'm extremely clear. And so I had to take a look and make sure that I named the exact executive order because, obviously sometimes people like to, say, well, it's not an executive order. He's just saying things to say things. No, this is an actual executive order. It is the Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History executive order that was issued on March the 27th, 2025. And again, this is an attempt by the executive branch to, as they say, kind of sanitize. That's what I'm going to say. Sanitize history and try to, again, marginalize a lot of the accomplishments of Blacks, women, other minorities under the aspect of diversity, equity, inclusion, and trying to restore this sanitization of American history. And I'll make sure that I link it in the show notes. But again, this isn't really for me to give an education lesson on that executive order because Google is free and I will put the link there. This is just an opportunity for me to remind everyone that we need to look at these moments as points in history, points in time where we need to level set and remember that we will not be baited. And that the history that we have, the history of who we are, all of our accomplishments, all the things that we have done has already been written, and it is written in us. It was written in us before we were a twinkle in our mother's eye. And we need to stand on that because God is always standing with us. And so for me today, I thought it was very important to have this conversation because as I've sat by and watched lots of discourse over the past month, and I've seen the discourse because this isn't new. I mean, this has been a part of the agenda since the 1619 Project came out by Nicole Hannah-Jones because, of course, laying fact to the history and the capitalistic nature of slavery and the generational impacts that it has had on America and the Black community has laid bare the hurts and the truths and the sensitivities of other people who feel like, no, it's not like that. You know, you don't want people to know the history of how we have been, and you want to sanitize things. It creates this need to attack. And to try to redefine, because again, you're trying to create a culture of American, I'm giving air quotes, what American greatness is, versus the reality of it, and understanding that this is a nation that is faulty and fallible and hurtful and based on colonialism and imperialistic type of views. You want to do that versus just deal with the truth of it all. So it is just very important that we, as Black people, as Black women, remember that we are not to be baited, because this is above us. And our name, our history, and who we are was defined before we were a speck in our mother's eye. And so today I thought it would be important to sit down and talk about it, because I see everybody, we're out here trying to preserve our peace. But like I mentioned to you earlier, people will continuously play in your face if you allow them to. So we need to make sure that we are educated about what's going on, but then at the same time, level setting and reminding ourselves who we are. So I wanted us to take this time to do it. And so, like I was mentioning, this is where they are. And, people want to try to erase us and realize if they can erase us because they are threatened by our power, they feel like it's an opportunity for us to lose the foundation of who we are, to lose ground, because we, get comfortable. And I'm not going to pretend and say that I don't feel like some of us have gotten comfortable. We have gotten comfortable with the advancements that our ancestors have been able to provide us. I mean, let's all not pretend. Many of us come from a long lineage of people who fought the fight for civil rights. As I've mentioned to you before, I was born in 1973. I am the first child that my parents ever had with all of their civil rights intact. My first knowledge of civil rights, of history, of Black history, was from my father and my mother, because back in the 70s, that's how you had those conversations. I was learning about George Washington Carver, in the Peanut in school. But when I would come home, I would learn about us being kings and queens and Kemet, and about, the history of civil rights with Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X for the first time when I was 12 years old. It was required reading in my home, because my parents understood the importance of laying the foundation that the world wasn't going to tell me. They had to tell me. They remembered that we are the griots, and the griots are the people in African culture who share the stories. We are those people, so that our history is not forgotten. And so I want to kind of use this podcast, this time with you, to kind of inspire you to remember who you are, and have a shift in your mindset that knowing our history, owning our history, is an act of self-preservation, but it's also an act of peace. Yeah, it's an act of peace, because again, we have to understand that people are triggered right now because of they recognize our power. And I think we also have to recognize that we cannot allow ourselves, our younger generation, to forget where we come from. I would love to say that we are not living in a society that is racist, but we are. Racism still exists, and I don't think anyone is immune to that. I think people need to understand that it is here, and that, yes, we come from a divisive history. You can't change that. You can whitewash it. You can try to forget it. You can try to erase it, but it can't be erased. It is what we were built on. And the exhaustion of having to prove that we belong here has led to a point where people are just now tired. I mean, we're resting. We're in a season of resting, the 92%. That's where everybody is. And there's nothing wrong with being in that season for a moment. But I would strongly recommend everybody also take a beat and remember that you can't be there forever. I would love to say we can rest forever, but we can't. And we know that. And I think it's time that we remind other people of the fact that we know that. Yeah, you got it for a moment, but believe me, we're not resting. We're doing what we need to do behind the scenes. And if you know, you know. And if you don't know, then you don't know, and it's not for you. And it's really that simple, because we are not in that moment anymore where we are feeling like we have to fight every battle, where we might lose ourselves in the process. You know why? Because a lot of us are remembering that this isn't my fight. We did our part. We keep doing our work. And it's now time for you to pick up the glove for a little bit. It's time for you to help pull the ball along, because it's not just about us. And that's the thing that people forget. But I think that they're slowly starting to realize you can't just oppress one group and just think that it relies to us. It's coming for you. Diversity, equity, inclusion, affirmative action. All of those things were put in place as, yes, an opportunity to allow more equitable distribution of jobs, of wealth to people who were not white men. But the people that benefited the most by diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, affirmative action, were white women. And so now all of a sudden you have decided that it's cool to let them, hey, attack the minorities. Maybe they're coming for you too. And now you're seeing that. And we see it every day, where you're seeing more white women, white men fighting back about what's going on. Okay, great. You should have been doing that a long time ago. That's why we're letting you sit up there and do that. It's our time to rest. But believe me, when we're resting, we're doing what we need to do behind the scenes, because we know what we know and we know what's going on. We're not immune to this. We're not blind to this. We've been living this systemic life for centuries, decades. So I mean, come on, Civil Rights Acts of 65 and 68 is only 2025. That's not that long ago. We understand where we are because we've been here before. And so to me, having that understanding, having that thought is allowing us to hopefully operate in a season where, again, we don't act like with no sensibilities, no strategic insight, that we don't just rely on emotion to navigate, and that we are acting more focused and diligently, but that we also recognize that who we are is not defined by you. And that we are not going to allow ourselves to be triggered, because as they also say in Romans 12:2, and yes, we are going to definitely stand on the word as we are navigating through this, because in times like this, it's essential. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And we're at that point now where we have recognized peace comes when we stop seeking validation and start standing in what we already know. And what we know is that we belong to him. We never belong to you. And so in this time, as we are like being triggered, as we're seeing the attacks on our history, as we're seeing the attacks on our museums, we have to claim back who we are. Because a lot of times, we also focus only on our history being framed up in the oppressive sides of it. But our history didn't start that way. Our history in Africa started in a sense of power, innovation, resilience. We were an independent people. We didn't ask to be brought here. We were brought here forcefully. We were doing our own thing, living our own lives, building our own kingdoms, our own wealth. But we were brought here against our will and forced to navigate in a system that never wanted us. And now we have learned to utilize the experiences of our ancestors to thrive. And so now what I find is that we have to take moments to remember that, because no matter what the world tries to tell you, because again, they want to try to, frame it back to where they feel history is. And of course, they're only going to go so far in the oppression, but they just, will start talking about how, during slavery, it wasn't that bad. You have to remember, no. I know the trueness of where we come from. And I have to understand at all times that no matter what the world tries to tell me, I am who God called who I am. And our history, our strength does not come just from the roots that were cultivated here on the shores of America. Our roots come from what was created centuries ago in Africa, and the power and the resilience and the regalness of our culture still resides in us. And that is why we are who we are. And so in these times, I really feel like these are moments where we have to kind of dial back into ourselves and start really trying to, take steps to have practical exercises to help us kind of navigate. Because yes, we're going to have to take that old school approach now. We're going to have to become more of the griots again. We're going to have to get back to being the storytellers of our family to make sure that our history passes on from generation to generation. And so I definitely want to make sure that I kind of give you some practical things to start to do as maybe some self-care, some self-love, some focusing points when you feel triggered, because again, you have to remember not to allow those triggers to bait you. So you need tools and techniques to help you along the way. So one thing that I love to do is as I journal, and especially I did it like in the start of the years, write a personal definition of self, rooted in your truth, not in outside narratives, but who you are. I mean, because again, there's always a label. This society loves to label. And we have to make sure that we have the ultimate label of who we are. So write that down and look at it. If you don't have to look at it every day, I always think about looking at it at least like once a month when I'm journaling. Like, let me take back and look at my personal definition of self. How am I doing along that line? Am I holding myself accountable to being the truest version of myself? Am I getting a little too caught up in the societal norms of what's going on? And never forget to talk about our history. I love to have conversations with people in reference to the beauty of our history, not just the slavery side of it, obviously, but the beauty of our history. Like sometimes in my house, when we're having dinner, especially around the holidays, we love to talk about the history of our family. And so like my mom, especially as she's getting older, I find that she likes to repeat a lot of the things that she experienced when she was growing up as a child, telling me how one story in particular that she told me was that there was a landowner that my grandfather worked for, and he loved to call her grandmother Aunt Sis. Like he would never call her by her name. He just called her Aunt Sis, and my mom said to him one day, the landowner, like, how you're only calling her that because you don't respect her. You don't respect my grandmother. And he told my grandmother, when my grandmother was right there, she told my grandmother right then in front of him that, he doesn't respect you. That's why he calls you Aunt Sis versus calling you your name. And the landowner was like, oh, no, why are you talking about? She's talking dangerous talk. Because, of course, back then, anybody who spoke out was always dangerous talk. And look at her gums. Her gums are purple. And, that's she's just evil. Like he said this about my mother in front of her grandmother. And my grandmother didn't discount what he said. But the fact that my mother had the ability as a young child, because I think she told me she was like 10 or 12 when she did that, to be able to speak out against something oppressive, to speak out and demand your respect. Those are the stories within our history that we need to be talking about, that we need to be preserving. And I would think that each of us has moments in our family that we have to, talk about, that we have to give life to, that we need to be griots about. Griots, the truth tellers, the storytellers. That's how stories were passed through Africa century after century. We need to get back to having more of those conversations, especially to our younger generation, talking about where we come from, being honest and transparent about it. I feel like sometimes, unfortunately, Black history is not talked about until it's February. And don't get me wrong, February is my favorite month. It's my birthday month. I love February, but February is the shortest month of the year. We should be talking about it 365 days a year. And I see lots of conversation in social media. There's some really great influencers who have made it their mission to elevate our history and talk about it, which is beautiful. But we have so much more to talk about outside of that, the history that it resides within our family, the people in our family who did incredible things, who sacrificed for us to be where we are. We have to continue to give life, because those are the role models. Those are the stories of resiliency, of strength that we need to keep fighting and talking about every year, every moment that we can, so that we can remind ourselves that we are always going to be more than what someone tells us to be, that we cannot worry about societal expectations and media portrayals of Black history, because we are living Black history every day. Black history is 365 days a year, 24 hours a day for each and every one of us who are Black. And we have to take pride in that. And we should never not talk about our history and our culture with reverence. And don't worry about the world talking about it. We need to talk about it. Because as long as we continue to pass our stories and our truths down, our power never dies. It continues to grow. And the reason why they are so up in arms, so willing to try to change it, to shape it, is because they are scared of our power. We are that power. We are living embodiments of it, and we can never, never allow that to be something that we lose. And so as we're doing that, I think it's important that we take the time to really get clear about what our narrative is going to be and how we're going to protect it, how we're going to protect our peace during that time. Because, again, we are not going to be baited, and we have to stand on business about that. So that's where we have to recognize that in this season of trying to make sure that we are standing strong, that we pick and choose how we respond when someone tries to mislabel us. I don't know about you, but I have really learned as I've gotten older, every fight is not my fight. And I think all of us are starting to learn that lesson. Again, I referenced the 92% because that's why folks are sitting back and just kind of navigating through, but they're coming out now. They're ready to try to poke the bear, obviously what we're seeing. And I see people, feeling it. And it's okay for us to feel it. We should feel about these attacks. We're human beings. But then at the same time, we have to pick our battles because we have to know when to reclaim our energy. We also have to understand, again, our power because we are the collective memory. And as long as we continue to educate ourselves and share our story, read our books and support each other and encourage each other, the memories, the history, it will never die, the trueness of it. And we have to be mindful about what we're taking in. So yes, the social media, because I've seen the commentary, it does, you see the comments and you feel the pain and the energy. Be mindful of how much negativity you absorb. Be mindful of it. It's okay to make the decision to say, you know what, I got to tap out today because I'm tired. Tap out. And like I said earlier, don't be afraid to share your history. Document your truth. Pass that knowledge down because that's what's going to help us navigate through. Because again, we are the most important thing. You are the history that they are trying to erase. And as long as you are around, never will be erased. Another biblical thing to stand on, especially as we are talking through this, is Proverbs 4:23. Guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Your peace is so essential. Our peace is so essential to this. It's resistance. Rest is resistance. This 92% thing, even though, people like to try to poke holes in it, feel a way about it, it doesn't matter. It's resistance. Because like I said, if you know what you know, we're doing what we need to do. And that's all that matters. And nobody else needs to worry about it. But for those of you that may feel like you still are in the fray, you still are in the attack, you feel like you got to defend everything and respond to everything, I think you need to get a little bit more selective in regards to how you are moving forward, how you are navigating this. And remember that your peace is just as important as a resistance. And it is not your job to fight every battle. And because you have to remember that your energy is too strong for that. And you've got to stand and guard your heart because everything that you do flows from there and we need you. There's going to come a time where we need you. So get selective, rest, tell the stories, build the legacy. Take the time to visit the museum if you haven't. Like, I'm really looking at some flights. I'm like trying to figure out how I can go ahead and get up there to the Smithsonian so I can see it really what it is and take as many pictures and memories as I can because, folks going to do what folks going to do. But that's not the end all be all. I know the history and I will not be afraid to tell it. And I think everybody needs to get to that point where we remember the history and not be afraid to tell it. So what I want you to remember as we are winding all of this down is that, yes, they are trying to erase their past. They're trying to erase it. You know why? Because they know how powerful we are. And their words, their opinions don't define who you are. You define who you are. And when we remember who we are, we preserve our identity, we preserve our legacy, and most importantly, we preserve our peace. And peace isn't passive, because I've heard that too. The 92%, why aren't they out here in the fight? Why aren't they doing all the things that they need to do? Rest is resistance. And I'm going to put that book down there. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. But it's an act of self-preservation. And it's time to recognize that you are the history. You are a living embodiment of who we are. And so you have to take on more of a responsibility of being that embodiment, telling our stories, being a griot. Because there's not enough museums, there's not enough books that can ever replace practical knowledge and experience, that can never replace you. And as you guys are processing all of this, I do challenge you. I challenge you to think about what is a truth that you can share with someone else this week about our history, about your history. Also, what's one thing that has been a false narrative about our history that you've heard or you've been fed or told about your history? Have you figured it out? Have you done the research? Have you read the books? Have you just replaced it with the truth? If you haven't, go and do that. Go find out the truth while it's still available. Talk to the elders. I love talking to older people, especially older Black people, because the experience in the story is priceless. If you have never read the 1619 Project, you should read it. Get a copy of the book. Make sure you listen to the podcast. Podcast is still out there. Educate yourself in the trueness of it. Become insatiable about us, about your history, and define yourself for who you are. And then always remember, they can try to erase who we are, but they'll never erase us. We don't have to be triggered. We will not be triggered. We will not be triggered when the world mislabels us, because we know who we are. And when we remember who we are, we move differently, we love differently, and most importantly, we rest differently. So take this time to rest, but take this time to do what you need to do, because you know what you need to do, and move accordingly and protect your peace. And remember, no matter what, you will not be triggered. You will not be baited, because you always will remember who you are and who you belong to. So that is this week's episode. I really hope that I gave you some things to think about, that I gave you some thoughts on how to protect our peace, some Bible verses to stand on is so important. That's why I really want you to get closer to who you belong to make sure that you talk to God, that you surrender, because there is so much peace there. And as the attacks start to ramp up, because they're getting ready to ramp up, you need to remember who you are and who you belong to, because remember, before you were born, He knew you. I called you by your name and you were His. Always remember that and stand on Isaiah 43:1, especially in this season. And don't forget who you are. So that, like I said, is the episode. I'm going to make sure that I put all my information in the show notes. I definitely encourage you to reach out to me, talk to me. I love having conversations. We will probably talk about more of this as things come up, but sometimes I just have to pick and choose how I can let this energy out, because I'm trying to preserve my peace. And I don't want to just constantly lose myself trying to defend everything, because I look at some of the crazy stuff that I see on social media and I'm just like, I see why people up in arms, but we're giving too much energy to people who don't deserve it. Who don't deserve it and who don't define us because they don't know us. And so no, I've stepped back, but I would love to engage with you. So I will have all of my information in the show notes. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Please like, share, subscribe. Again, I hope this episode gave you some peace, because remember, we are not going to be baited and we are going to make it through. And I hope that today that you are spending some time loving on yourself, loving on some other people, telling some stories, preserving your peace, and thriving. So I will talk to you guys next week. I want to thank you again for your continued love and support. I am praying for all of you. I'm believing for all of you. And I will talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.